Hello, and welcome to Peter Presents Iliad. Now, this week, of course, is episode 18, and we're going to be going through book 18. And if we remember what happened last episode, Patroclus, best friend of Achilles and lover, was killed by Hector outside the walls of Troy, and also by Euphorbus, who has been soundly thrashed, but Hector's still out there, and he has donned Achilles' armor. Oh my goodness, there's a very loud plane out there. I hope that's not bothering you. I think the military base has been restocking lately. Anyway, so yeah, it's Achilles hasn't found out yet what has happened. And the two Ajaxes have been defending the body that's being carried away aloft by Menelaus and Menestheus, I think it is. You know what? I forget some of these names too, but anyhow. Meriones, that's it. Okay, cool. So, this week, or this evening, I am using a mug that you might recognize but haven't seen before. This, you can't really tell, is the sort of inverse of a mug that I used several episodes ago, which has the seal, the Great Seal of the Navajo Nation on it. The other one is white, but basically the same, and I have two. Why? Because my dad thought I'd like both of them, and so thank you, Father, for this one. And when did I start doing mugs? I think I started doing mugs in like episode 3 or something like that, so don't worry, I've got plenty for the rest of this series. Anyhow, let's get on with the episode. Hang on, let's just over to, there we go. Let me just check the chat, see if anybody's here yet. Yes, they are, and everything seems to be going just fine. Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone, for getting here. I think we've waited long enough for everybody else to join. This is live in case you're watching this later. But anyhow, let us continue with Homer's Iliad, Book 18. The fight went on, like wildfire burning. Antilochus, running hard like a herald, found Achilles close to his upswept hulls, his great heart brooding with premonitions of what had indeed already happened. This looks bad, all these Greeks with their hair in the wind, stampeding off the plain and back to the ships. God forbid that what my mother told me has now come true, that while I'm still alive, Trojan hands would steal the sunlight from the best of all the Myrmidons. Patroclus, Menoetius' brave son, is dead. Damn him, I told him only to repel the enemy fire from our ships and not to take on Hector in a fight. Antilochus was in tears when he reached him and delivered this unendurable message. Son of wise Peleus, this is painful news for you to hear, and I wish it were not true. Patroclus is down, and they are fighting for his naked corpse. Hector has the armor. A mist of black grief enveloped Achilles. He scooped up fistfuls of sunburnt dust and poured it on his head, fouling his beautiful face. Black ash grimed his fine-spun cloak as he stretched his huge body out in the dust and lay there, tearing out his hair with his hands. The women whom Achilles and Patroclus had taken in raids ran shrieking out of the tent to be with Achilles, and they beat their breasts until their knees gave out beneath them. Antilochus, sobbing himself, stayed with Achilles and held his hands. He was groaning from the depths of his soul, for fear he would lay open his own throat with steel. The sound of Achilles' grief stung the air. Down in the water, his mother heard him, sitting in the sea depths beside her old father, and she began to wail. And the salt-water women gathered around her, all the deep-sea Nereids, Glauce and Thalia and Cymodose, Nisaea and Speo, Thoe and Oxide Hali, Cymathoe, Actae, Limnoera, Melite and Iaria, Amphithiote and Argoe, Doris, Penope, and milk-white Galatea. Numertes, Apsuades, and Callianassa, Clymene, Ionera, Ionassa, and Maera, Ariathea, and Amathea, hair streaming behind her, and all of the other deep-sea Nereids. They filled the silver, shimmering cave, and they all beat their breasts. Thetis led the lament. Hear me, sisters, hear the pain in my heart. I gave birth to a son, and that is my sorrow, my perfect son, the best of heroes. He grew like a sapling, and I nursed him, as I would plant on the hill in my garden. And I sent him to Iliad on a sailing ship to fight the Trojans. And now I will never welcome him home again to Peleus' house. As long as he lives and sees the sunlight, he will be in pain, and I cannot help him. But I'll go now to see and hear my dear son, since he is suffering while he waits out the war. She left the cave, and they went with her, weeping, and around them a wave broke through the sea, and they came to Troy. They emerged on the beach, where the Myrmidons' ships formed an encampment around Achilles. He was groaning deeply, and his mother stood next to him and held her son's head. Her lamentation hung sharp in the air, and then she spoke in low, sorrowful tones. Child, why are you crying? What pain has come to your heart? Speak, don't hide it. Zeus has granted your prayer. The Greeks have all been beaten back to their ships and suffered horribly. They can't do without you. And Achilles answered her, Mother, Zeus may have done all this for me, but how can I rejoice? My friend is dead, Patroclus, my dearest friend of all. I loved him, and I killed him. And the armor, Hector cut him down and took off his body, the heavy, splendid armor, beautiful to see, that the gods gave to Peleus as a gift on the day that they put you to bed with a mortal. You should have stayed with the saltwater women, and Peleus should have married a mortal. But now, it was all so you would suffer pain for your ravaged son. You will never again welcome me home, since I no longer have the will to remain alive among men. Not unless Hector loses his life on the point of my spear and pays for despoiling Menoetius' son. And Thetis, in tears, said to him, I won't have you with me for long, my child, if you say such things. Hector's death means yours. From under a great weight, Achilles answered, Then let me die now. I was no help to him when he was killed out there. He died far from home, and he needed me to protect him. But now, since I'm not going home, and wasn't a light for Patroclus and any of the rest of my friends who have been beaten by Hector, but just squatted by my ships, a dead weight on the earth, I stand alone in the whole Greek army when it comes to war, though some do speak better. I wish all strife could stop, among gods and among men, and anger too. It sends sensible men into fits of temper. It drips down our throats sweeter than honey, and mushrooms up in our bellies like smoke. Yes, the warlord Agamemnon angered me, but we'll let that be, no matter how it hurts, and conquer our pride because we must. But I'm going now to find the man who destroyed my beloved, Hector. As for my own fate, I'll accept it whenever it pleases Zeus and the other immortal gods to send it. Not even Heracles could escape his doom. He was dearest of all to Lord Zeus, but fate and Hera's hard anger destroyed him. If it is true that I have a fate like this, then I too will lie down in death. But now, to win glory, and make some Trojan women or deep-breasted Dardanian matron wipe the tears from her soft cheeks, make her sob and groan. Let them feel how long I've been out of the war. Don't try out of love to stop me, I won't listen. And Thetis, her feet silver on the sand. Yes, child, it's not wrong to save your friends when they are beaten to the brink of death. But your beautiful armor is in the hands of the Trojans, the mirrored bronze. Hector himself has it on his shoulders. He glories in it. Not for long, though. I see his death is near. But you, don't dive into the red dust of war until with your own eyes you see me returning. Tomorrow I will come with the rising sun, bearing beautiful armor from Lord Hephaestus. Thetis spoke, turned away from her son, and said to her saltwater sisters, Sink now into the sea's wide lap, and go down to our old father's house, and tell him all this. I am on my way up to Olympus, to visit Hephaestus, the glorious smith, to see if for my sake he will give my son glorious armor. As she spoke, they dove into the waves, and the silver-footed goddess was gone, off to Olympus to fetch arms for her child. And while her feet carried her off to Olympus, Hector yelled, a yell so blood-curdling and loud it stampeded the Greeks all the way back to their ships beached on the Hellespont's shore. They could not pull the body of Patroclus out of javelin range, and soon Hector, with his horses and men, stood over it again. 3 times Priam's resplendent son took hold of the corpse's heels and tried to drag it off, bawling commands to his men. 3 times the 2 Ajaxes put their heads down, charged, and beat him back. Unshaken, Hector sidestepped, cut ahead, or held his ground with a shout, but never yielded an inch. It was like shepherds against a starving lion, helpless to beat it back from a carcass. The 2 Ajaxes, unable to rout the son of Priam from Patroclus' corpse. Hector would have, to his eternal glory, dragged the body off, had not Iris stormed down from Olympus with a message for Achilles, unbeknownst to Zeus and the other gods. Hera had sent her, and this was her message. Rise, son of Peleus, most formidable of men. Rescue Patroclus, for whom a terrible battle is pitched by the ships, men killing each other, some fighting to save the dead man's body, the Trojans trying to drag it back to windy Iliad. Hector's mind especially is bent on this. He means to impale the head on Troy's palisade after he strips off its skin. And you just lie there. Think of Patroclus becoming a rag bone for Trojan dogs. Shame to your dying day if his corpse is defiled. The shining sprinter Achilles answered her, Iris, which god sent you here? And Iris, whose feet are wind, responded, none other than Hera, Zeus' glorious wife. But Zeus on high does not know this, nor do any of the immortals on snow-capped Olympus. And Achilles, the great runner, how can I go to war? They have my armor, and my mother told me not to arm myself until with my own eyes I see her come back with fine weapons from Hephaestus. I don't know any other armor that would fit, unless maybe the shield of Telamonian Ajax. But he's out there in the front ranks, I hope fighting with his spear over Patroclus dead. Windfoot Iris responded, We know very well that they have your armor. Just go to the trench and let the Trojans see you. One look will be enough. The Trojans will back off out of fear of you, and this will give the Greeks some breathing space, what little there is in war. Iris spoke and was gone, and Achilles, whom the gods loved, rose. Around his mighty shoulders Athena threw her tasseled aegis, and the shining goddess haloed his head with a golden cloud that shot flames from its incandescent glow. Smoke is rising through the pure upper air from a besieged city on a distant island. Its soldiers have fought hard all day, but at sunset they light innumerable fires so that their neighbors in other cities might see the glare reflected off the sky and sail to their help as allies in war. So too the radiance that flared from Achilles' head, and up to the sky he went to the trench, away from the wall and the other Greeks out of respect for his mother's tense command. Standing there, he yelled, and behind him Pallas Athena amplified his voice, and shock waves reverberated through the Trojan ranks. You have heard the piercing sound of horns when squadrons come to destroy a city. The Greek's voice was like that, speaking bronze that made each Trojan heart wince with pain. And the combed horses shied from their chariots, eyes wide with fear, and their drivers went numb when they saw the fire above Achilles' head burned into the sky by the gray-eyed one. 3 times Achilles shouted from the trench. 3 times the Trojans and their confederates staggered and reeled. 12 of their best lost in the crush of chariots and spears. But the Greeks were glad to pull Patroclus' body out of range and placed it on a litter. His comrades gathered around, weeping, and with them Achilles, shedding hot tears when he saw his loyal friend stretched out on the litter, cut with sharp bronze. He had sent him off to war with horses and chariot, but he never welcomed him back home again. And now the ox-eyed lady Hera sent the tireless, reluctant sun under the horizon into ocean's streams, its last rays touching the departing Greeks with gold. It had been a day of brutal warfare. After the Trojans withdrew from battle, they unhitched their horses from the chariots and held an assembly before thinking of supper. They remained on their feet, too agitated to sit, terrified, in fact, that Achilles, after a long absence, was back. Polydamas was the first to speak, prudent son of Panthus, the only Trojan who looked both ahead and behind. This man was born the same night as Hector, and was his comrade, as good with words as Hector was with a spear. He had their best interests at heart when he spoke. "Take a good look around, my friends. My advice is to return to the city, and not wait for daylight on the plain by the ships. We are far from our wall. As long as this man raged against Agamemnon, the Greeks were easier to fight against. I too was glad when I spent the night by the ships, hoping we would capture their upswept hulls. That hope has given way to a terrible fear of Peleus' swift son. He is a violent man, and will not be content to fight on the plain where Greeks and Trojans engage in combat. It is for our city he will fight and our wives. We must go back. Trust me, this is how it will be. Night is holding him back now, immortal night. But if he finds us here tomorrow, when he comes out in his armor in daylight, then you will know what Achilles is, and you will be glad to be back in sacred Iliad, if you make it back and are not one of the many Trojans the dogs and vultures will feast upon. I hope I'm not within earshot, but if we trust my words, as much it may gall, we will camp tonight in the marketplace, where the city is protected by its towers, walls, and high gates closed with bolted, polished doors. At dawn, we take our positions on the wall in full armor, and so much the worse for him if he wants to come out from the ships and fight us for our wall. He will go back to the ships after he has had enough of parading his high-necked prancers in front of the city. He will not have the will to force his way in. Dogs will eat him before he takes our town. And Hector, glaring at him under his helmet, Polydamas, I don't like this talk about a retreat and holing up in the city. Aren't you sick of being penned inside our walls? People everywhere used to talk about how rich Priam's city was, all the gold, all the bronze. Now the great houses are empty, their heirlooms sold away to Phrygia or Maeonia, since Zeus has turned wrathful. But now, when the great god, son of Kronos, has vouchsafed me the glory of hemming the Greeks in beside the sea, now is no time for you to talk like a fool. Not a Trojan here will listen. I won't let them. Now hear this. All troops will mess tonight with guards posted and on general alert. If any of you are worried about your effects, you can hand them over for distribution. Better our men should have them than the Greeks. At first light we strap on our armor and start fighting hard by the ships. If Achilles really has risen up again and wants to come out, he'll find it's tough going, for I will be there. I, for one, am not retreating. Maybe he'll win. Maybe I will. The war god doesn't care which one he kills. Then Hector and the Trojans cheered, the fools, their wits dulled by Pallas Athena. Hector's poor counsel won all the applause, and not a man praised Polydamas' good sense. Then the troops started supper. But the Greeks mourned Patroclus the whole night through. Achilles began the incessant lamentation, laying his man-slaying hands on Patroclus' chest, and groaning over and over like a bearded lion whose cubs some deer hunter has smuggled out of the dense woods. When the lion returns, it tracks the human from valley to valley, growling low the whole time. Sometimes it finds him. Achilles' deep voice sounded among the Myrmidons. It was all for nothing, what I said that day, when I tried to hearten the hero Menoetius, telling him I would bring his glorious son home to Opais with his share of the spoils after I sacked Iliad. Zeus does not fulfill a man's every thought. We too are fated to redden the selfsame earth with our blood, right here in Troy. I will never return home to be welcomed by my father Peleus or Thetis my mother. The earth here will hold me, and since I will pass under the earth after you, Patroclus, I will not bury you until I have brought here the armor and head of Hector who killed you, great soul. And I will cut the throats of 12 Trojan princes before your pyre in my wrath. Until then you will lie here beside our upswept holes, just as you are, and round about you deep-bosomed Trojan and Dardanian women will lament you day and night, weeping, women we won with blood, sweat, and tears, women we cut through rich cities to get. With that he ordered his companions to put a great cauldron on the fire, so they could wash the gore from Patroclus' body without further delay. They put a cauldron close for heating baths over a blazing fire, and poured in the water, then stoked the fire with extra wood. The flames licked the cauldron's belly, and the water grew warm. When it was boiling in the glowing bronze, they washed the body, anointed it with rich olive oil, and filled the wounds with a seasoned ointment. Then they laid him on his bed, covered him from head to foot with a soft linen cloth, and spread a white mantle above it. Then the whole night through the Myrmidons stood with Achilles, mourning Patroclus. Zeus said to Hera, his wife and sister, "So you have had your way, my ox-eyed lady. You have roused Achilles, swift of foot. Truly the long-haired Greeks must be from your womb." And the ox-eyed lady Hera replied, "Awesome son of Cronos, what a thing to say! Even a mortal man without my wisdom will succeed in his efforts for another man. How then was I, the highest of goddesses, both by my own birth and by marriage to you, the lord and ruler of all the immortals, not to cobble up evil for Troy in my wrath?" While they spoke to each other this way, Thetis' silver feet took her to Hephaestus' house, a mansion the lame god had built himself out of starlight and bronze, and beyond all time. She found him at his bellows, glazed with sweat, as he hurried to complete his latest project, 20 cauldrons on tripods to line his hall, with golden wheels at the base of each tripod so they could move by themselves to the god's parties and return to his house, a wonder to see. They were almost done. The intricate handles still had to be attached. He was getting these ready, forging the rivets with inspired artistry, when the silver-footed goddess came up to him, and Charis, Hephaestus' wife, lovely in her shimmering veil, saw her. And running up, she clasped her hands and said to her, "My dear Thetis, so grave in your long robe, what brings you here now? You almost never visit. Do come inside so I can offer you something." And the shining goddess led her along and had her sit down in a graceful silver-studded chair with a footstool. Then she called to Hephaestus and said, "Hephaestus, come here. Thetis needs you for something." And the renowned smith called back, "Thetis, then the dread goddess I revere is inside. She saved me when I lay suffering from my long fall, after my shameless mother threw me out, wanting to hide my infirmity. And I really would have suffered had not Thetis and Eurynome, a daughter of Ocean's stream, taken me into their bosom. I stayed with them 9 years, forging all kinds of jewelry, brooches and bracelets and necklaces and pins in their hollow cave, while the ocean's tides, murmuring with foam, flowed endlessly around. No one knew I was there, neither god nor mortal, except my rescuers Eurynome and Thetis. Now the goddess has come to our house. I owe her my life, and I would repay her in full. Set out our finest for her, Charis, while I put away my bellows and tools." He spoke and raised his panting bulk up from his anvil, limping along quickly on his spindly shanks. He set the bellows away from the fire, gathered up the tools he had been using, and put them away in a silver chest. Then he took a sponge and wiped his face and hands, his thick neck and his shaggy chest. He put on a tunic, grabbed a stout staff, and as he went out, limping, attendants rushed up to support him. Attendants made of gold, who looked like real girls, with a mind within, and a voice, and strength, and knowledge of crafts from the immortal gods. These busily moved to support their lord, and he came hobbling up to where Thetis was, sat himself down on a polished chair, and clasped her hands in his, and said, "My dear Thetis, so grave in your long robe, what brings you here now? You almost never visit. Tell me what you have in mind, and I will do it, if it is anything that it is at all possible to do." And Thetis, shedding tears as she spoke, "Hephaestus, is there a goddess on Olympus who has suffered as I have? Zeus, son of Cronos, has given me suffering beyond all the others. Of all the saltwater women, he singled me out to be subject to a man, Ajax' son Peleus. I endured a man's bed, much against my will. He lies in his halls forspent with old age, but I have other griefs now. He gave me a son to bear and to rear, the finest of heroes. He grew like a sapling, and I nursed him as I would nurse a plant in my hillside garden. And I sent him to Iliad on a sailing ship to fight the Trojans. And now I will never welcome him home again to Peleus' house. As long as he lives and sees the sunlight, he will be in pain, and I cannot help him. The girl that the army chose as his prize, Lord Agamemnon took out of his arms. He was wasting his heart out of grief for her. But now the Trojans have penned the Greeks in their beachhead camp, and the Argive elders have petitioned him with a long list of gifts. He refused to beat off the enemy himself, but he let Patroclus wear his armor, and sent him into battle with many men. All day long they fought by the Scaean gates, and would have sacked the city that very day. But after Menoetius' valiant son had done much harm, Apollo killed him in the front ranks, and gave Hector the glory. So I have come to your knees, to see if you will give my son, doomed to die young, a shield and helmet, a fine set of greaves, and a corslet too. His old armor was lost when the Trojans killed his faithful companion, and now he lies on the ground in anguish." And the renowned smith answered her, "Take heart, Thetis, and do not be distressed. I only regret I do not have the power to hide your son from death when it comes. But armor he will have, forged to a wonder, and its terrible beauty will be a marvel to men." Hephaestus left her there and went to his bellows, turned them toward the fire and ordered them to work, and the bellows, all 20, blew on the crucibles, blasting out waves of heat in whatever direction Hephaestus wanted, as he hustled here and there around his forge, and the work progressed. He cast durable bronze onto the fire, and tin, precious gold, and silver. Then he positioned his enormous anvil up on its block, and grasped his mighty hammer in one hand, and in the other his tongs. He made a shield first, heavy and huge, every inch of it intricately designed. He threw a triple rim around it, glittering like lightning, and he made the strap silver. The shield itself was 5 layers thick, and he crafted its surface with all his genius. On it he made the earth, the sky, the sea, the unwearied sun, and the moon near full, and all the signs that garland the sky, Pleiades, Hyades, mighty Orion, and the bear they also call the wagon, which pivots in place and looks back at Orion, and alone is aloof from the wash of ocean. On it he made 2 cities, peopled and beautiful, weddings in one, festivals, brides led from their rooms by torchlight, up through the town, bridal song rising, young men reeling in dance to the tune of lyres and flutes, and the women standing in their doorways admiring them. There was a crowd in the marketplace, and a quarrel arising between 2 men over blood money for a murder, one claiming the right to make restitution, the other refusing to accept any terms. They were heading for an arbitrator, and the people were shouting, taking sides, but heralds restrained them. The elders sat on polished stone seats in the sacred circle, and held in their hands the staves of heralds. The pair rushed up and pleaded their cases, and between them lay 2 ingots of gold for whoever spoke straightest in judgment. Around the other city 2 armies of glittering soldiery were encamped. Their leaders were at odds. Should they move in for the kill or settle for a division of all the lovely wealth the citadel held fast? The citizens wouldn't surrender, and armed for an ambush. Their wives and little children were stationed on the wall, and with the old men held it against attack. The citizens moved out, led by Ares and Pallas Athena, both of them gold, and their clothing was gold, beautiful and larger than life in their armor, as befits gods in their glory, and all the people were smaller. They came to a position perfect for an ambush, a spot on the silver where stock came to water, and took their places concealed by fiery bronze. Farther up they had 2 lookouts posted, waiting to sight shambling cattle and sheep, which soon came along, trailed by 2 herdsmen, playing their panpipes, completely unsuspecting. When the townsmen lying in ambush saw this, they ran up, cut off the herds of cattle and fleecy silver sheep, and killed the 2 herdsmen. When the armies sitting in council got wind of the ruckus with the cattle, they mounted their high-stepping horses and galloped to the scene. They took their stand and fought along the river banks, throwing bronze-tipped javelins against each other. Among them were Hate and Din, and the Angel of Death, holding a man just wounded, another unwounded, and dragging one dead by his heels from the fray, and the cloak on her shoulders was red with human blood. They swayed in battle and fought like living men, and each side salvaged the bodies of their dead. On it he put a soft field, rich farmland, wide and thrice tilled, with many plowmen driving their teams up and down rows. Whenever they came to the end of the field and turned, a man would run up and hand them a cup of sweet wine. Then they turned again, back up the furrow, pushing on through deep soil, to reach the other end. The field was black behind them, just as if plowed, and yet it was gold, all gold forged to a wonder. On it he put land, sectioned off for a king, where reapers with sharp sickles were working, cut grain lay deep where it fell in the furrow, and binders made sheaves bound with straw bands. 3 sheaf binders stood by, and behind them children gathered up armfuls and kept passing them on. The king stood in silence near the line of reapers, holding his staff, and his heart was happy. Under an oak tree nearby, heralds were busy preparing a feast from an ox they had slaughtered in sacrifice, and women were sprinkling it with abundant white barley for the reapers' dinner. On it he put a vineyard loaded with grapes, beautiful in gold. The clusters were dark, and the vines were set everywhere on silver poles. Around he inlaid a blue enameled ditch, and a fence of tin. A solitary path led to it, and vintagers filed along it to harvest the grapes. Girls, all grown up, and light-hearted boys carried the honey-sweet fruit in wicker baskets. Among them a boy picked out on a lyre a beguiling tune and sang the Lenos song in a low, light voice, and the harvesters skipped in time and shouted the refrain. On it he made a herd of straight-horned cattle. The cows were wrought of gold and tin and rushed out mooing from the farmyard, dung to a pasture by the banks of a roaring river, making their way through the swaying reeds. 4 golden herdsmen tended the cattle, and 9 nimble dogs followed long. 2 terrifying lions at the front of the herd were pulling down an ox. Its long bellows alerted the dogs and the lads who were running on up, but the 2 lions had ripped the bull's hide apart and were gulping down the guts and black blood. The shepherds kept trying to set on the dogs, but they shied away from biting the lions and stood there barking just out of harm's way. On it, the renowned lame god made a pasture in a lovely valley, wide with silvery sheep in it, and stables, roofed huts, and stone animal pens. On it, the renowned lame god embellished a dancing ground, like the one Daedalus made for ringleted Ariadne in Wygnosus. Young men and girls in the prime of their beauty were dancing there, hands clasped around wrists. The girls wore delicate linens, and the men fine-spun tunics, glistening softly with oil. Flowers crowned the girls' heads, and the men had golden knives hung from silver straps. They ran on feet that knew how to run with the greatest ease, like a potter's wheel when he stoops to cup it in the palms of his hands and gives it a spin to see how it runs. Then they would run in lines that weaved in and out. A large crowd stood round the beguiling dance, enjoying themselves, and 2 acrobats somersaulted among them on cue to the music. On it he put the great strength of the river ocean, lapping the outermost rim of the massive shield. And when he had wrought the shield, huge and heavy, he made a breastplate gleaming brighter than fire, and a durable helmet that fit close at the temples, lovely and intricate, and crested with gold. And he wrought leg armor out of pliant tin. And when the renowned lame god had finished this gear, he set it down before Achilles' mother, and she took off like a hawk from snow-capped Olympus, carrying armor through the sky like summer lightning. And that was book 18. What a very different book this time, I should say. First off, I mean, it's at the end. I try to go in order normally, but I can't hold back. Hephaestus, what the heck is with that shield? Jeez, man. Like, it's pages of stuff going on about of all the stuff that he puts on this shield. And I remember the first time I read that, I was like, what is the point of that? Like, what? And we get some clues and hints of some things where, like, he basically makes these, he makes things that move. Keep in mind, this is thousands of years ago. Now we have robots. Like, robots still can barely walk, you know? It's but, I mean, well, they got those ones that are going to kill us that people keep trying to knock over. So, okay, fine. But, like, think about this. He's made, like, these cool, like, people that are sort of automatons almost, like robots almost, like they're magic and they're made of gold and they look like real people. But on this shield, he doesn't just make a shield, he makes an entire world on this with cities and agriculture and livestock and war, and it's this, and the sea and the stars and the moon and the sun, everything's on this shield. But a lot of the domestic life that we see in here, first off, it's really interesting. We hear about war all the time. And then this thing's full of, like, here's people, like, harvesting stuff. Here's, like, a governor. Here's, like, a legal system. Everything's on this shield. But I wonder, I have a theory as to why this is. And someone out there more learned than I may be able to say, this is poppycock, or have a better idea. But here's my theory of all this. Of this shield. Thetis says Achilles is doomed to die young. And so what does Hephaestus do? He makes a shield, the thing that will protect Achilles from his death. And on that shield, I think what he does is puts all the things that if Achilles dies, he will never experience. Like, I think this is just I haven't heard this, I could be completely wrong, but my theory is Hephaestus is like, all right, Achilles isn't going to have this, so I'm going to give it to him. And it's kind of ironic that that's on his shield. That's the thing that protects you. Almost like if he pursued that normal life, that could save him. Interesting. That's just my idea. I don't know. But yeah, let's go back. First off, I want to talk about something. About the emotional core of this story, which is unpopular opinion coming up. I don't know where this idea came from that guys aren't allowed to express their emotions in pop culture, because that's just not true. Okay, there are like a few Arnold Schwarzenegger movies where he is like a one-note badass the entire time. And then right after that, Die Hard comes out, and he's a normal guy, and everyone's like, that's way better, okay? We've got frigging Iliad from thousands of years ago, where a guy is weeping, he's losing his mind, he's pouring dust on his head, he's crying, like, he's laying on the ground, getting his nice clothes messed up. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody that sad before, okay? Like, it's maybe but, like, it's... Achilles is out there with it. He doesn't care, okay? And he's not the first one. This book is full of that, okay? And it's like, okay, that's this book, all right? Let's look at every other movie, superhero movies. The guys cry all the time, all right? There's, like, the angels in the outfield. Like, it's I don't understand why people think that there's only one type of male character out there, or like that there's an overwhelming amount of stuff in pop culture that says guys aren't supposed to cry, because they do all the time. All right, in the most like ridiculous stuff, like there's Shrek cries for crying out loud at some point. Like there's like, come on. So I'm calling BS on it. All right, yeah, there's a few action movies from the 80s which aren't as good as other movies that are in the same genre, that have a more emotional appeal to them, that guys still find good, and so I don't really get it. Like, the whole idea that you're only allowed to cry at a football game is a lie, all right? Like, if you had a terrible dad who's like, you know, like when your dog died, was like, don't cry about your dog dying. Okay, he was a bastard. I concede that. But that's not the norm of society, okay? If your dog dies, you're allowed to cry. If your mom dies, you're allowed to cry, all right? There's like this whole, like, who came up with that? Anyway, all right, so we're getting impassioned here. But anyway, like, so, you know, bullshit, all right? Sorry to bring the French back into it, but no, all right? You're lying. Okay, if your dad was a jerk, okay, and told you not to cry about everything, your dad isn't society, okay, and that's not the norm. I defy that. I think it's wrong. It's not true. It's not the average at all. Is it true that guys don't typically cry as much as women? Yes, we have less of the hormone, typically, on average, than women do that makes you cry, all right? But that doesn't, anyway, all right, so whatever. This is not a frigging biology episode. So yeah, this episode, this guy's cry, him and his entire team are anguished beyond anything they've ever felt, all right? And this whole book is full of sorrow and grief the entire time, okay? And it's like, you could say, oh, well, you know, serious stuff like Saving Private Ryan, you know, or whatever, has, you know, the real harsh side, and that's what this book is. Yeah, this book is that, but it isn't just that kind of thing that does that. And this isn't just that kind of book. This is also the Avengers game, like, Endgame book movie thing, all right? So it's both. Remember, both of these ideas are coming together, and it's whatever. Okay, so All right, so that's what I have to say about that. Now, there's also a weird thing that you might have caught, completely changing gears here, which is that Hephaestus, when Thetis comes to his house and Hephaestus' wife is like, "Oh, hey, Thetis is here," Hephaestus tells a story. Now, we've heard this story before at the beginning of this book. When the last time we saw Hephaestus was when he kind of saved his mom, Hera, at dinner. I think it was at the end of book 1. And he tells her the story about how Zeus threw him off the balcony and he fell all day and all that stuff. And he cheers her up. But what did Hephaestus say this time when Thetis was there? He says about Thetis, "She saved me when I lay suffering from my long fall, after my shameless mother threw me out." So, and it says, "wanting to hide my infirmity." Now, that can mean two things. Either A, it means that Zeus did throw Hephaestus off and that's how he got lame, and then later Hera threw him off. Or it can mean the first story isn't true. Dun dun dun. That could be the case. Alright, so how does that work? If he's at table with everybody there and he tells his mom a lie that perhaps no one else knows is a lie, that can be two things, I think. Either you can interpret that as he's being mean to her, like, "Oh, remember when Zeus was real mean and he did this thing," and in subtext he's saying to her, like, "You're a horrible person and you're a terrible mother." You know, he could be being mean like that. Or perhaps he's being kind by trying to help her and save face and put it on Zeus by telling her a story that she knows isn't quite true. Or, at the very least, reminds her of what she did to him. Yikes. So Hephaestus, what an interesting character. I've mentioned that before, and he's got a lot of other stories about him in Greek mythology, and some of them, unfortunately, are not very cool. Hephaestus is not 100% good guy all the time, sad to say. You can look that one up. But, but isn't it so cool that we get to see the master of crafts at craft? Like, and the way they describe, like, his bellows, like, and they're hitting heat wherever he wants, and they do as he says. I can just imagine all the craftsmen in the audience listening to this thousands of years ago, like, "Oh man, I would love to have that. That would make my job so much easier rather than actually having to do everything. I could just tell things to make themselves, and that, oh, wouldn't it be cool to make a big heavy cauldron that I never had to pick up?" Everybody would love that. I bet there were people back then who were constantly trying to invent those things. Like, you know that some Smith's secret project while he was making a cauldron was like, "I gotta figure out a way to put wheels on this that like kind of work better," and all that. Cauldrons, by the way, in the ancient world, in that sort of place and time, cauldrons were one of the most expensive things you could have. I think I mentioned that before when Agamemnon offered Achilles a bunch of cauldrons along with the other prizes that he was going to be given to kind of coax him back into fighting. But when Hephaestus says that he had, like, he was getting like a bunch of cauldrons to line his wall and he'd take to parties and they'd wheel away, that's a big sign of wealth back then. That would be like if I was building a bunch of Lamborghinis or something. Okay, like, just to bring it into, like, people don't really use cauldrons anymore, but well, maybe you don't when you're making your special brews and dealing in the black arts. But anyhow, yeah, it's so interesting. We get a little bit of action in this book as well with Hector and Polydamas. Have any of you ever felt like Polydamas? When it's like, "Hey, we're about to get totally destroyed. Here's a smart plan," and someone else who's just more popular than you. It's like, what if we just, like, go out there and just go for it, man? And then you end up, well, we'll see what happens, but, Homer calls them fools. And now there's another weird thing. Foreshadowing. There's like literal foreshadowing. Like in a lot of movies, they'll have like a prophecy or something like, oh, so and so's gonna bring balance to the force or whatever. But in this book, they're constantly telling you the future. It's almost like they're spoiling it. Almost. Except, I believe there's a point to it. And as to what that point is, perhaps that's more what we'll talk about in the last episode. Or the last book, anyway. We might have a follow-up episode at the end where I talk about what happened after Iliad or something, but who knows. But I think that's a wonderful time to go into the chat and see if y'all have been active. Hurrah! Well, we've had a little bit of talking. All right, so into the chat we go. All right, Joe starts us off by saying, Oppa! Yay, Alexandra. Allie says, woo! And Jess says, Iliad hype. Very glad you're here, Jess. Joe says, Galatea. Yeah, Jess Paul says, did I hear Galatea? Yes, Jess, you heard right. Galatea. I'm sure you know the namesake of the film that you are in, which is currently in post-production, being directed by my good friend Benji the Koi Boy. Bubba the Musician says, there seems to be a continuing theme of sorrow at the knowledge that one will never welcome home their beloved dead. Yeah, I think so. And I think that's something that is extremely relatable today. When I was in Greece with my family, when I think I was about 13 years old, there was a graveyard, like a cemetery that we went to, which was for the Second World War, because many of you may know that Greece played a vital role, and some say, well, at least one person I know, says the turning point in the war had to do with what happened in Greece. Now, after the invasion of southern France, Operation Dragoon, I believe it was, which my dear Papa was a part of in the Royal Navy, there were a lot of good fellas who died. Lots of Americans, lots of Brits, and lots of Gurkhas. And we went to that cemetery. And one of the things that is so interesting about that cemetery was none of those people who were buried there were from Greece. So their bodies were still there. Their dead weren't welcomed home. But one of the other things was, this was before, obviously, DNA testing was a thing. And there were a lot of graves that just said, an unknown soldier. And a lot of them said 2 unknown soldiers, or 3 unknown soldiers. And if I remember correctly, the most extensive one was one grave which had the remains of 6 separate men in it, all that were unidentifiable, which tells you a little bit about what that might have looked like. But normal grave size, normal headstone, 1 for 6. There is also an unknown soldier's tomb, obviously in DC, but there is another one in Greece, which I've also been to, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The American Guard is absolutely unparalleled, but the changing of the guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Greece is quite interesting. And if you are in the area, I do encourage you to witness that. And if you get there right after they do it, there's plenty of pigeons and people with bird feed for you to entertain yourself for a while until then. All right, so Joe, keeping up with the comments, says, the hero's journey, Achilles, talisman under construction. Oh, the hero's journey, Achilles, talisman under construction, yes. Joe says, damn, that is one detailed shield. And Joe says, at first I thought you skipped some pages and went on to another scene. Yeah, it's, I tried to make it clear that it was the shield by being like, on it, he put blank, you know. But yeah, it's a crazy shield. Crazy shield. So, anyhow, what a different book this is. This book has had so many different things going on. We've had arguments, we've had covert operations, we have lots of battles going back and forth, we have drama between goddesses, and then drama between gods and goddesses, we've got all this kind of stuff, and now this one's and we've had sadness, and all these potted tragedies, and now we have Achilles' tragedy, when the one that he loves, like, he feels pain now from war, which he hasn't before. And we shall see how it goes. But look at this, guys. We're up to book 19 now. We've only got that much left, and oh my goodness, like a lot of this is, yeah, we got that much left. So I think we're 3 weeks away, or something like that. 7 episodes, I think, if immediate math is correct. But thank you so much for joining me for this. And celebration! I keep forgetting to say, but we actually passed 1,000 views for all the videos together, which is quite exciting for me. Is it 1,000 views or 1,000 hours? I forget. I think it's views. Whatever. But either way, thanks for being loyal to the video series. I'm glad that some of you are enjoying it and liking it. I've never really tried to plug this channel on here before, but being like, share, and subscribe. But if there are other people that you think would like this kind of thing, feel free to tell them about it, you know? But I'm doing it for the funsies, not monetized, at least at this point. So yeah, just but yeah, spread the love if you love it and you know someone else who would too. But thank you so much for joining me this week, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday for episode 19. And remember, that's 19 out of 24. Things are heating up. Anyhow, have a wonderful night, everybody, and bye-bye.